back to the show. Today we have Dr. Sean Wise. He's the professor of entrepreneurship at Ryerson University. He's also a partner at Ryerson Futures as a seed investor, a best-selling author, and helped launch Dragon's Den, Canada's version of Shark Tank. Dr. Sean, welcome back to the show.
Thanks so much. It's just Sean is fine.
Okay, well, that's cool, man. Yeah, but, well, I appreciate you taking time out of your day to be on the show. You did the radio version a while ago. And, you know, I thought, let's have you on kind of the TV version of the show because you have tons of experience. And for people that don't maybe know who you are, maybe do you want to kind of give a quick intro of kind of your background because you've done a ton of things in the space?
Yeah, thank you so much. It's very nice to be back. Everything I do is around the same thing, helping people become more empowered through entrepreneurship.
Okay.
You know, and by entrepreneurship, I talk about the big E, not just the little e. So I'm talking about everything from Silicon Valley to the dry cleaner on the corner store. You know, they're all different types of entrepreneurs,
Sure.
but all of them have similar things in common, and all of them are looking for this magical, you know, roadmap to success. So I started off, I was born very, very young in Toronto, Canada, and for undergrads, I studied, you know, engineering and economics. I got a law degree, an MBA, and eventually a PhD in entrepreneurship. But for me, I always wanted to know, you know, why some entrepreneurs succeed and some don't.
Sure.
And I thought the best way to do that would be to get involved in the venture capital industry, which got me involved with Shark Tank Dragon's Den, which got me involved with writing books, and back to my PhD. So what I know, which is very limited to a very specific time, that early stage when you are moving from idea to revenue, that first, you know, sort of 100 steps, that first sort of, you know, how do I evaluate it? How do I test it? When do I quit my day job? And really for the last 19 and a half years, that's been my focus. Sometimes it's in the classroom, and sometimes it's in the boardroom, and sometimes it's on TV.
Sure.
But it's always about the same thing. What can I do to help that entrepreneur succeed faster, fail faster, learn faster?
No, but I think that's great, right? And you kind of touched on it a second ago. So you've written a bunch of books, and we don't have time to cover them all. But maybe I really want to kind of talk a bit about kind of the Startup Opportunities, Know When to Quit Your Day Job book that you recently kind of published. So what was the reason behind kind of writing this book? Because I think a lot of people struggle with that topic when they're doing a startup.
Well, thank you. I only hope that to be true. I mean, this all started because Brad Feld and I were on a TV show, and Brad Feld is the notoriously amazing venture capitalist, you know, Fitbit and MakerBot and Guitar Hero. I mean, the guy is, I only wish to be as successful as my co-author, Brad. But he's also the nicest guy. Sure. And so he has the same problem, if not a larger version, that I have, that the dragons have, that the sharks have, which is everyone wants you to tell them if their idea is any good.
Sure.
Now, I'll be honest, about 20 years ago when people asked me that question, I arrogantly thought I knew the answer. And then the dot-com boom becomes the dot-com bust, and you realize just how stupid you are. And then through Web 2.0, I learned, and I made some good investments and some bad investments, and you learned. But what I've seen is that the cost to launch a business has dropped so dramatically.
Sure.
From, you know, 5 million to 500,000. You can get proof of concept, and I don't mean the light bulb goes on. I mean someone will pay you to read under the light bulb that you just tested. That's proof of concept you can get for less than $5,000.
Sure.
You can prototype in 3D. You can use AutoCAD. You can use Kickstarter. You can use Alibaba to get OEMs make. You know, there is no more excuses. And so what would happen is people would come up to us and they would say, "Is my idea any good?" And regardless of whether I thought I knew or not, I didn't think it was appropriate to give a flippant answer after 1 minute of knowing something when this person has dedicated years of their life.
Sure.
I mean, I'm going to assume people are reasonable and rational, which I know from the television show that's not always true. But I don't want to disrespect people who work their asses off, who work their tushes off to work hard by going, yeah, that sucks.
Sure.
And so Brad had this problem times 10. And
Sure.
Kevin O'Leary told me a story about peeing at a urinal and people beside him pitching him. You know, like it just doesn't stop. I get very little time at home, and when I do, I want to be with my wife. I don't want to be listening to pitches, but also I don't want to be disrespecting people. Maybe that's my Canadian in me. I want to say sorry before they even start. But so Brad and I decided, how could we help the most amount of people? And we wrote this book called Startup Opportunities. And it was to do two things. One, it was to help you see that the excuses you're currently relying on are full of crap.
Sure.
The barriers to entry have dropped to zero. The only thing holding you back from testing your great idea and seeing if it is great is you. Yep. You don't need 5,000, 500,000. You can do these kind of early stage tests, this lean startup methodology, with $50 on a website.
Sure.
So I think that one of the myths we try to shatter in the book is that there are kingmakers, that there are these blessed people in venture capital who could say, there you go, you're a success. It's not true. Venture capital is to fuel growth. It's not to prove you're smart. It's not a party-worthy event. Right? It feels like it. I know how tough it could be. I've been an entrepreneur too. But we wrote this book to help people answer that question, is my idea any good? And if it's not good, what is the issue? Sure. And if the issue is known, what can be done about it? And so our joy isn't that we're not going to hurt people's feelings, because that's part of just, the process, but it's more about empowerment. You don't need me, because I can only have like 40 meetings a week. Like, there's only so much time of me.
Sure.
But this book, which is usually available on sale now for $9.99 at Amazon, is really good at helping people answer that question for themselves, and that's why we wrote it. Sure. Now, we did reach out to our friends in Shark Tank and our friends in Dragon's Den, and we did get Chris Sacca to write the foreword, and we did get everyone to submit a deal. And so the book is peppered with these real life stories of what the founder thought was happening,
sure,
and what the investor thought was happening at that first spot, and just how that impacts other things. And so, I don't think it's rocket science, but I do think for the first time it's transparent. This is the book, Startup Opportunities, Know When to Quit Your Day Job, available on Amazon, is really the book you read before the lean startup. Okay, when you're trying to figure out which idea to bet the farm on, when you're trying to figure out which one to do first, when you're trying to figure out how to know when to quit your day job.
Sure. No, I think that's really good advice. You also have this 100 steps to start up, and I think it's actually really kind of interesting. So walk me through kind of what exactly kind of that is, because I think it ties in quite a bit to the book. Is that fair to say?
Oh, yes. So once we wrote the book and we did our own MVP, we sort of beta tested it, we gave it away to our friends and family, and we asked them to read it and circle parts that, weren't really easy to get, and challenge us on things. And so we did it. We drink our own Kool-Aid, like we used our own techniques. But one of the problems that came out of the book was, what do you do next? Okay, so you've done everything in the book, and you found an idea that's scalable, an idea that has an elasticity of demand so you can have a good price. You found something you're really good at, something you're obsessed with, something that you even maybe have like a proprietary advantage in. Once you've found that, then what do you do?
Sure.
And so that just caused the problem to be different. It didn't help. So we get all these notes about that. And so what I decided to do was to figure out what is the best median to distribute that information. And in this case, we came up with an online course.
Okay.
And so 100 Steps to Startup is really step 0, I want to think about doing a startup, to step 100, I have enough revenue, I have enough growth, I have enough proof of concept that I can raise external money. So this is everything you do before you go and find an angel or a VC. You may have to ask friends and family to help, but not because of this course, but because of the company. Sure. And so 100 Steps to Startup is everything from ideation to customer discovery to customer validation. How do you fill out that lean canvas? How do you answer questions around your business model, like what is the lowest cost way to get to customers? Sure. Now, everybody, including some of the people I showed it to, were like, 100 steps? That's like so much work. And that's a fair question, and I think it's a fair statement. But if you think you're going to go from 0 to $100,000 in revenue in less than 100 steps, then I don't think you've really thought it through. We have steps like, how do I register a domain name? How do I buy a Google AdWord? Because I can't assume anyone knows anything, because I didn't know anything.
Sure.
That was the whole benefit of failing early on, is that you kind of figure out your own humility. And so what we've done is we basically reverse engineered how you get to what's called product market fit. Okay. Right, product market fit. How do you know your product is in such demand that you can sell it at a low price, that you can make it at a low price, sell it at a high price, get to your customers? That's product market fit. When you know you have a business that can scale. It's costing you $1 to get your customers, but you're making $45 off each one. That's a great time to hit product market fit. But what happens before that?
Sure.
How do you find problem solution fit? And how do you find before that initial customers? And so really it's moving from the 1%, that sort of high-tech Silicon Valley startup, which is what most of these techniques were learned from, the Tinders, the Ubers of the world. But it's also making it available if you're starting a restaurant.
Interesting.
Because people don't realize that a restaurant does have a smaller MVP. Just as a car and a skateboard have a relationship that they're all sellable ways to get from point A to point B faster.
Sure.
You have that with a restaurant. My students want to start a restaurant. I say, awesome. I say, go get a hot dog cart.
Interesting. Okay.
Go get a hot dog cart and sell the food that you're going to be famous for. Sell the brands you're going to be famous for. Sure. If you want to be the student center food guys, then be those guys. Once you've paid for the cart and you've seen how much it costs to get a customer, how to treat a customer, then maybe find a restaurant that doesn't have an evening menu, like a breakfast restaurant, and rent it out a few nights a week. Okay. You don't have to sell everything to bet on a 5-year plan and hope for the best. We did that. It was called 1997. Yeah. Today, you don't do that. You test the little pieces and you put it together. And you hustle. And it's not easy. Don't get me wrong. But it should be not easy because of the work it takes to do, not because you don't know what to do next. We wrote 100 Steps to Startup because it helps first-time founders and even serial entrepreneurs know what to do next when they go from 0 to 100.
No, I think that's really good. And you brought up kind of a really interesting point because, like, I get asked sometimes, too. It's like, I need to raise millions of dollars to build, like, the first version, or I need...
But you don't!
But it's like... I know guys, like, to your point a second ago, is like, I know guys that have built prototypes with, like, cardboard, that's their first version of their hardware product, right? Like, how much does cardboard cost? Or
we have
Lego.
Students using Legos, and then they build a Kickstarter page, and then they move forward. We have gals and guys in our school, Ryerson University, which is kind of like the Babson of Canada. It's entrepreneurship is what we kind of do.
Sure.
We have gals graduating with $10,000, $20,000 MRRs, because they had a project, they learned in the real world.
Sure.
But that's where you're going to learn entrepreneurship. People, I have to say, they often take the piss out at me because they say, how can you be a professor of entrepreneurship? You can't teach entrepreneurship. Well, I disagree. Okay. I agree you can't teach entrepreneurship, but you can create an environment which facilitates the learning of entrepreneurship, which gives students and young entrepreneurs a chance to fail, which makes it part of the norm to fail, which means taking risk is more encouraged. Do that while you're in 4th year. There's nothing wrong with that as well as learning everything else. Yeah. Get some real world experience before you go move back into your parents' basement. Like, try to grow a little bit. You don't need $1 million for a website. You don't even need a website for a website. You can use PowerPoint to mock it up.
Sure.
What you don't need is excuses. And between startup opportunities, which helps you shape the idea into a truly opportunity that you want, someone you want to really follow, and in 100 steps, there's no excuses. Whatever it costs, I don't even know together. $150, $250, I haven't even looked at the prices. Sure. But my point here is that enough, get off the couch. When I was on Dragons, then people would always laugh and say, how do you guys let those people on? And I'd say, well, why are you laughing at them? Because their idea didn't take off? What are you doing? You're sitting on the couch. You're sitting on the couch, going boo. Well, stop being in the audience. Get off the couch. Stop talking about what a big shot entrepreneur you could be if only you had an investor. Go be one. You don't need an investor.
Sure.
You need a customer.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm very passionate about this.
But no, like, that's probably why I wanted to have you again on the show, because you've kind of been there, you've done that, you work with people kind of on a daily basis, and you see this stuff, right? So hopefully the message kind of resonates with people, because I always find it funny that you read this stuff online of, like, what happens in the valley, and you need, like, tens of millions of dollars to do anything. It's like, that doesn't even really happen, like,
in the valley anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't happen. That's a 1997 mentality.
Exactly.
You know what? I think that the truth is that we've democratized the ability to create startups. The valley does have an advantage due to critical mass and the tipping point and all kinds of other key MBA words. But it's still 99 out of 100 people aren't doing a valley startup. Mm-hmm. The only unicorn these people know is what they're selling in their window. And that's okay. That's business. That's the lifeblood of our economy. You are the innovators. You're the people who brought us email and the Dyson vacuum cleaner.
Sure.
You know, we need these people, but we also need the new restaurant that's bringing, you know, a different cuisine to a market that's never had it. You know, we need the dry cleaner that wants to offer 24 hours a day, 7 days a day. Yeah, maybe it's not $1 billion idea, but what's wrong with feeding your family?
Sure.
What's wrong with building a business? It was good enough for our parents and our grandparents. Listen, I'm blessed. I work at a fund that funds unicorn-bound startups. Like, that's our seed. That's my space, software, and that's all I do.
Sure.
But the world has taught me that there's so much more out there.
Yeah.
And the only difficulty people have now is they don't know that the playbook has been invented, not just by me, but we've studied them. The advantage of having so many waves of innovation, the dot-com boom, Web 2.0, this current age of unicorns, is that so many companies have grown, died, that we can actually analyze them as academics and reverse engineer what the cause was. Remember, it used to take generations to generate billions of dollars. The Eaton family, the Kennedy family, right? But in our lifetime, innovation is going so quickly that this now takes half a decade, right?
Yeah.
Half a decade.
Which is crazy.
So when you can see this many of these cycles, you can study them.
Sure.
And in fact, shame on you for not studying them. Who are you really risking? Your family, your money, yourself. Sure. Listen, being in a startup, being in a new venture, even running a small business is not easy.
Sure.
But don't make it harder on yourself by not having the same information that everyone else is free to get.
No, I think that's really good advice. And you touched on something that I think people sometimes forget is you can make a really good business and make 100, 200 grand a year, and there's nothing wrong with it. It doesn't need to be this like $1 billion idea, right? And I think
if you have a reasonable expectation, that's great. And many entrepreneurs who are sustainable are doing just that.
Sure.
They're making, you know, $200,000 in dividend payments out to themselves. They're employing people in the neighborhood. They're giving a job to their college kid. They're running it. There's nothing wrong with that.
Sure.
You don't need flashy cars and big buildings to have happiness, right? I think you need to have something you love doing, and I think you have to have something that you love doing and is sustainable.
Sure. Well, and I also think, go ahead. Keep going. Sorry.
No, please.
I was going to say, I think the other thing, too, that I want your thoughts on is, like, where you're geographically located is kind of irrelevant now, at least in my opinion.
It is not kind of irrelevant. It is absolutely irrelevant. Okay? I'll give you the easiest story in the world. So I'm a big geek. Like a big Star Trek geek, a big Star Wars geek, always have been. I didn't jump on the bandwagon now. I've been that way all my life. Okay, they stole my milk money because of it, so I'm going to own it.
Sure.
But when I wanted a Star Trek Captain Kirk jersey, one that made me look like Captain Kirk, we'd call today the cosplaying. If I wanted one of those, I had to wait till once a year. The annual Comic-Con would come to my city, unpack. I'd have to show up on day one and hope they had my size, because I wouldn't get another chance to buy it. Yeah, now Google Captain Kirk, terry cloth gold shirt, and you'll have 1,000 suppliers from China to Amazon to Think Geek. Sure. And so that, in a nutshell, is what's happened everywhere.
Sure.
When I went to MBA school in the 90s, you know who my choices for business partners were? People in my MBA class. That was my entire business network.
Sure.
Okay. Now I can go to Founder Dating, which isn't about dating, by the way. I can go to Founder Dating and find a co-founder in minutes, hours, days, easier than I could find a wife. Sure. Right?
Yeah.
But,
fair enough.
You know, but that is change that you don't have to be in the same city. Look at places in Africa and Eastern Europe where they never laid the infrastructure for broadband. Now the phones can do broadband. So they've skipped a whole generation of technology, but they've also fast forwarded. They do their banking on their phones. It's their identification. People even pay in minutes in some places instead of and in megabytes of data. So I think that's full of crap. I think geography is no longer. If I wanted to make the very best Captain Kirk jersey and it was so awesome, then I would have it up on Etsy, and that would lead to orders from Think Geek, and that would lead to Amazon drop shipping, and I would never have to leave northern Michigan or southern Alabama or wherever I wanted to live.
Sure.
So it's total crap. Your partners are global, your customers are global, and the pieces of your business are also global. You can 3D print your product in a foreign jurisdiction and have someone deliver it by bicycle.
Yeah.
As long as there's the margin in it, as long as you can charge more than it costs, you can do that.
Sure.
And it gets done. So the only thing holding people back today is people.
Yeah, no, I partly why I knew you were going to have that answer, and I thought I just wanted, but it also helps coming from somebody that's kind of been there, right? Like you have the background, you've done it.
All this gray hair is because of startups. Mine, other people. I had my first business at 13 after I got fired from McDonald's, and I've never wanted to look back.
Okay.
Yeah, I was a lawyer. Yes, I studied engineering. Yes, I worked in venture capital. It's not quite the small business lifestyle. But I've also mentored companies across our great nation. I've also worked a ton with small business to understand what can be brought over, because everyone loves a startup.
Sure.
But 99 out of 100 people are running what I call a real business, a small business, a chain of garages, a hairdressing salon. They're just as important.
Yep.
And innovation goes on there just as much. You can't have a hair salon without a website.
Yep.
You just can't. Right? But 20 years ago, the only people with websites were like Google.
Yep.
So I think things change. And if anything's changing, it's the democratization, your ability to access. You don't need big money, so there's no money issue. You don't need to figure out what to do next, because there's things like 100 Steps to Startup that will help you figure out what to do next. And you don't need to move to the big city, whether that be Silicon Valley or Toronto or New York or London or Taipei, because everything is digital.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so you're really the only thing that's holding you back. Not you personally, of course. Well, you're doing fine.
No, but I think that's really good to kind of stress to people, because I get asked that sometimes just doing the show. People are like, well, should I move to the Valley? I'm like, no, why? Like, in some ways, it's like, can you afford to? Like, go to the Valley a couple times a year, or pick a mixer or an event or a big thing in Silicon Valley or New York or wherever the big event is, or the Web Summit in Lisbon, like go if you want to go, but, and take that money that you're saving on just rent alone, right? And put it
in competition for engineers and
Sure.
engineering costs. I think there is a point to pick up and go to the Valley. If I want to be an actress, which I don't, I would go to Hollywood, okay? Sure. Like there is a time and a place, but that's for a very slim amount of people. Yep. There's lots of acting gigs in your local neighborhood, whether it be the local theater or the local, this metaphor is going to die, or the local radio station.
Sure.
My point is that we know historically and now scientifically that being involved in a startup community on a local level, even if it's a small town startup community, actually contributes to success probability.
Interesting.
And there's so many reasons for that. It's very lonely being an entrepreneur. So when you hang out with other entrepreneurs, you share your pain. There's best practices that develop. There's what they call filling in the holes in social networks. People that they know, and over and so forth. So whether your town is 10,000 people or 10 million, you should have a local startup community. And you can meet at the library. You can meet at the accelerator. You can meet at the economic development office. Trust me, people want you to do this.
Sure.
And just by being together, once a week, 3 times a month, you will find your quality of life going up, and you will find yourself understanding that you're just like everyone else. You're hustling and you're trying to do good for you and your family.
Perfect. Sean, sadly, we're out of time. So let's close with mentioning where people can get more information about the book, 100 Steps to Startups, and anything else you're kind of involved in, or Wikipedia?
You can always find me on Wikipedia, I imagine. I haven't looked, but I'm sure it's there. You can always Google me and you'll find this. The book's on Amazon, but it's also in Barnes & Noble and Indigo. The book can be found out officially at www.startup-opportunity.com. You can tell I don't do this often. And 100 Steps to Startup. The key is that it's the number 100, the word steps, the number 2, the word startup.com. Yeah. So it's 100 steps to startup.com, 100 steps to startup.com. I'm sure there'll be a link on the webpage for this great podcast. Thank you so much for inviting me. I love talking about this stuff, and I hope it was helpful to you and your listeners.
It very much was, and I, again, thank you for doing this, and I really appreciate taking the time out of your busy schedule to actually be on the show.
Oh, I love it. Anytime you want me back, I'll be there. Thanks so much.
All right, man. Thanks, man. Bye.
Be well.